All right, thank you. We are good to go. We are being recorded on WebEx and are also live on YouTube. We can get started.
Thank you very much. Good morning and welcome to the February 28th New York State DNA Subcommittee meeting. At this time, we'll take attendance to establish a quorum. We'll conduct the business today through roll call as all members are present virtually. So please respond present when I call on you. Dr. Bieber,
Fred Bieber, present.
Dr. Corrado,
Present.
Dr. Gettings,
Present.
and Dr. Sozer.
Here.
Thank you. And including myself, we've established a quorum. Dr. Kidd and Dr. Smith are unavailable for this meeting, but we do have a quorum. We'll proceed to the next item on our agenda. We need to vote to approve this agenda. So you all have a draft agenda for today's meeting. Is there any discussion regarding this agenda? Okay. Hearing none. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda for this meeting?
So moved.
Okay, Dr. Bieber, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Sozer. Dr. Sozer has seconded the motion. So when I call on you, please state your vote. My vote is aye. Dr. Bieber,
Fred Bieber, aye.
Dr. Corrado,
Aye.
Dr. Gettings,
Aye.
and Dr. Sozer.
Aye.
Thank you all. The motion carries. The next item is to review and approve the draft minutes from our November 15, 2024 meeting. You've all received the draft minutes of the November 15, 2024 meeting in our packet. Is there any discussion regarding these minutes? Okay. Seeing none, do I have a motion to accept the minutes of the November 15th, 2024 meeting?
So moved.
I make
Gettings.
I think Dr. Gettings got you first. So Dr. Gettings has given a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Dr. Sozer has seconded the motion. So when I call on you, please state your vote. My vote is aye. Dr. Bieber,
Fred Bieber, aye.
Dr. Corrado,
Aye.
Dr. Gettings,
Aye.
and Dr. Sozer.
Aye.
The motion carries. Next up on our agenda is the accreditation and laboratory update portion. So we'll start with Monroe County Crime Laboratory. This is for informational purposes only, so no vote is required. We do have members of the laboratory available virtually in case there are any questions. The laboratory has received notification from the FBI that the review of their QAS audit conducted in April of 2024 is complete. The late submission of their document to the FBI will result in a finding on their next audit. Does anyone have any questions for the laboratory? Okay, seeing none.
Mike, Mike, why was it late? Was there a problem why it was late?
Okay, let's give a second here and we'll have someone from the lab will join us.
Monroe County, you are now unmute. You can unmute yourself, and if you have a camera, you're welcome to use it.
Morning. Did you hear the question?
Yes, we did. Can you hear me?
Okay.
This is Gail Conklin. I'm the DNA technical leader at the Monroe County Crime Lab. We ended up doing a corrective action based on this omission of submitting the documents within the 30 days. What happened was when the QAS document was sent to us, I, as the DNA technical leader, was not included on that email. So I was not aware that it was received. So it was a lack of communication. We have done a root cause and just trying to improve how we can prevent this from happening in the future, but there's no way to go back in time. So that's what we've done.
I remember that from a previous meeting now that you said that. Okay, yeah.
Are there any other questions for Monroe County? Okay, if not, thank you very much for jumping on and giving us that information. Okay, next up in our agenda is Nassau County Office of the Medical Examiner, Division of Forensic Services. Again, the materials in your packet are included. This is for informational purposes, so we do not need to vote, but we do have a representative from the laboratory available if there are any questions. So in October, the laboratory underwent a surveillance activity which included an external QAS audit, and there were no findings in that audit. The assessment report was provided and reviewed at our November meeting. The laboratory has since received their continuation of accreditation documents from ANAB. The laboratory submitted their QAS audit to the FBI and has received confirmation that based on their review, the laboratory is in compliance with the external audit requirement and the FBI's quality assurance standards. Are there any questions for the laboratory? Seeing none, congratulations, Nassau County, and thank you for being available. Next on the agenda is the New York City OCME Department of Forensic Biology. And the materials, letters, and audit documents are within the meeting materials. And this is for informational purposes only. There's no vote required. And we do have members of the laboratory available to jump on if anyone has any questions. Back in October, the laboratory underwent a surveillance activity. There were no findings. The assessment report was provided and reviewed at our November meeting, and the laboratory has since received their continuation of accreditation documents from ANAB. The lab completed an internal QAS audit in September, and there were 4 findings. So standards 6.4, 6.41A, and 12.1.1. 3 analysts did not complete organic extraction training prior to writing or performing technical review of cases where organic extraction was used to process samples. Number 2, standards 9.10 and 9.10.3. Laboratory guidelines are insufficient in defining how to perform statistical analyses for mitochondrial DNA results in specific instances of heteroplasmy. Item 3, standard 14.1. Analysts did not document nonconformities for failed positive controls with additional peaks present in several instances. Number 4, standard 15.5, review of internal and/or external DNA audit documentation by technical leader was not formally documented. The laboratory has submitted the actions taken to remediate those issues. The Office of Forensic Services and ANAB received notification that the Director of Forensic Biology, Tim Cooperschmidt, will be stepping down from his role on February 21st, last week. First Deputy Chief Medical Examiner, Dr. Michelle Sloan, will serve as the interim director for forensic biology. Are there any questions for the laboratory for these 2 issues dealing with their audit from their internal QAS audit and also the notification of a change in leadership? See, Dr. Gettings?
Yeah, I just wanted to say for the internal audit, I think they did a great job of finding some kind of nuanced issues and tightening up their protocols. So I think that's commendable for an internal audit.
Does anyone have any other questions? Yeah, I do agree with you, Dr. Gettings. This is the reason we have these internal audits to help tighten up, as you say. So if there are no other questions, thank you, New York OCME, and congratulations. We'll next move to the Onondaga County Center for Forensic Sciences Laboratory. Again, this is for informational purposes. No vote is required. We do have a representative from the lab available for any questions. The laboratory has received confirmation from the FBI that, based on their review, the laboratory is in compliance with the external audit requirement and the FBI's quality assurance standards. Does anyone have any questions for the laboratory? Okay, seeing none, thank you and congratulations. Next up, the New York State Police Crime Lab. Again, there are materials in our meeting materials that, as far as the letters and assessments received. Once again, this is for informational purposes, so we will not be taking a vote. We do have members of the laboratory available for questions. In January, the laboratory underwent a surveillance activity and there were no findings. ANAB has issued a continuation of accreditation based on the results of the activity. And for the laboratory, for the New York State Police Crime Lab, the laboratory has notified DCJS of changes to personnel. Allison Sage has taken over as State CODIS Administrator, and Jamie Belrose is the Bioscience Casework Technical Leader. Are there any questions for the laboratory? Dr. Corrado.
It's not really a question for the laboratory. It's more for DCJS, I think. I'm just wondering, I think in the past, when there's been replacement of personnel, particularly in someone in a technical lead position, we were provided with their CV, or so we could agree that they were, or at least review their qualifications, I'll say. And I know both these, well, I know Jamie personally, I know that she is qualified, but I just think as a matter of business, it would be good for the DNA subcommittee to review the CVs. I don't know if DCJS, is that just something that is normally done or not?
So we typically do receive CVs for management positions. So we actually do have a CV. We received it from OCME for their interim director. Typically with tech leads, we don't, unless the subcommittee is requesting them. If you'd like us to request them specifically, we can do that. Our standard practice would be director, assistant director, and quality manager. But we certainly can ask.
I mean, I guess, I don't know what the other committee members think, but I think for a technical lead in DNA, it would be good for us to review those qualifications as well. But I don't know. Does that need to be a motion, or if others disagree, then that's fine.
I think it would personally be helpful. I, again, know both individuals, very highly qualified, but I think it would be helpful if it's not too much of a burden. I don't know. I'll let Ms. Dooley chime in here. I'm sorry. I've got the New York State Police on my brain at the moment. Ms. Palmer.
Yes, we will ask, and it doesn't need to be a motion. No. It's okay with it.
We're
Okay.
more than happy to provide those, by the way, so we can get those to you. And I don't know if they want to send them ahead of the next meeting, because we do know it'll be quite some time, but we can get those to you today.
Thank you, Jill.
Yep.
I guess going forward, would you like us to request that at similar level of change?
I mean, I don't want to speak for the rest of the subcommittee, but I think it would be quite useful. The technical leader is a very powerful position in the lab, and I think it would be, at least, not for us to confirm or to approve, but at least to have awareness and look at the qualifications of.
We could do that for technical lead and CODIS admins in the future moving forward. Then we'll make a note.
Thank
I
you.
think that would be great. Does anyone else have any other questions or comments? Okay, next up on the agenda is old business. At this point, we'll have a partial match update. So at this time, Ms. Palmer will give us an update regarding the partial match program.
Certainly. There are no updates with our partial match program. We remain with 93 total applications and 49 names released. Additional testing did not confirm the other 44. So we have all the 49 investigations closed and 2 convictions. I can go right into the familial search update if that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Since the last subcommittee meeting in November, we have an additional 7 applications received. These are all initial applications. We have 6 applications approved and 1 search completed with no results. So in total, that makes 71 applications. 55 were initial with 8 renewals and 8 resubmissions. 50 of those are approved with 13 rejected, 3 withdrawn, and 5 are currently in the review stage. Of the 50 approved, 11 are in the search queue, 39 searches have been completed, with 28 no names released, 11 with release of names, 6 remain open, 5 are closed with 2 arrests, and there's 1 conviction.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions on the familial search update? Okay, very well. Then the next item on the agenda is CODIS bulletins, and it's my understanding that Tom Leach has notified OFS that there are no relevant CODIS bulletins at this time. Next, item D, the NIST interagency report. At our DNA subcommittee meeting on May 9th, 2024, the report by the expert working group on human factors in forensic DNA interpretation, entitled Forensic DNA Interpretation and Human Factors, Improving Practice Through a Systems Approach, was recognized. Since that meeting, there have been several discussions regarding the report and feedback from the Biological Sciences Technical Working Group was provided. We had some discussions back last summer, I believe. At their December 13th, 2024 meeting, the Commission on Forensic Science voted to request the DNA subcommittee provide a written position statement regarding the report. At this time, does anyone have any discussion that we would like to take on first the report and the Commission's request for providing a statement? Yes, Dr. Corrado.
I guess just to get the discussion started, I think, the last time we talked about this, we talked a little bit about how we thought, while the report had some really good points, there were some concerns with it that it wasn't vetted, there was no peer review, and it appeared that some of what the recommendations were more opinion-based, and perhaps some of them were aspirational. Having said that, I think, in my opinion, there were some good recommendations regarding report wording and things like that. So I understand, I think, why the Commission's asking for some input. I mean, we are the DNA experts that should be advising them. But I also thought that we left it that the BioTwig would, kind of look at some of those recommendations and decide if they wanted to update their report wording. So I guess I'm thinking that I don't know if it would help the BioTwig for us to maybe review some of those recommendations and, give our thoughts on it. I think we could do that. I think the problem is that the public meeting law is really, it makes it difficult for us to meet as a group to come up with something. So I think if we decide that there is something we want to review and recommend, maybe a small subgroup would be helpful, and we could put something together and then send it out individually to the other groups. But I'm not sure what everyone feels. I mean, I guess what I'm a little concerned about is, we can review and give our recommendations to what we think perhaps the BioTwig should consider. Maybe they would appreciate those recommendations. I'm not exactly sure what the commission was hoping we would provide to the commission. I guess that's sort of my concern.
I guess I'd like to know, can maybe someone explain that? I didn't go back and look at their meeting that meeting to see specifically what they were asking for in the recommendation. Is there someone that could maybe fill us in a little bit on that?
I think what Kathy had mentioned about the conversations where there were some things that were valid, some things that seemed aspirational, some things that seemed maybe disconnected. Putting that pen to paper to point out what are those things? Which of these things are good recommendations? Which of the things in this document are aspirational? I think they were looking for someone to really hone in for them what those are, because we've heard that kind of that's been the narrative that both the BioTwig has talked about and the conversations around this document have been. And I do know the BioTwig is working on their report standardization update document. NICLAC met earlier this week, and they will be on a timeline to have that finalized by summer. But certainly, I think and I don't want to speak for BioTwig, I think I saw Craig's name pop up. He can certainly pop in and comment on that. But I know they are making progress on their piece of that as well.
Dr. Bieber, yes, please go ahead.
Mike, do you think that the commission would accept the idea that each of us as individuals could write to BioTwig with our own personal thoughts on the document as it stands, and hoping that our individual comments, would be taken into account in their update or revision, and then put this on hold? Because I don't think we could put our holy water over the document as it stands.
That's an excellent point, Dr. Bieber, and I agree with Dr. Corrado as well, that we may want to roll both this item D, which is on the human factors, I'm going to call it the human factors report with NIJ NIST, with the next item, which is the DNA mixture interpretation foundational review, that the final document was released in December of 2024. There was the initial draft document that was released about 3 years ago or so. And so, again, the subcommittee has received a lot of material from the different labs in New York State with their validation documents and SOPs, which have been provided to us. It's over, I think, well over 1,200 pages long with all of the combined documents. And so I know that I don't think there's been a formal request. I know that at the September 2021 meeting from the Commission on Forensic Science, they were discussing, when the report just came out, the draft report, about wanting the DNA subcommittee to review protocols and validations. And so we have that information. And so I kind of would like to hear input from everyone. Would it be better for us to individually, do a summary and our own opinion, or should we convene a small subcommittee of 3 and have them to do sort of some initial work before we, move forward? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Mike, I have a thought. These are two different requests, and I think, at least it's my opinion, that at least from my perspective, I should say, I look at them differently. And I'm wondering if we want to keep them separate and not put them together. I see the human factors as a lot of different information that was put into one report. And I think Kathy did a good job of kind of describing that a few minutes ago. And I think we should maybe treat that as one piece of work and then treat the second report differently. That I see as being very technical in one specific area. And looking at that a little bit differently. I have some thoughts on that report that I can, we can discuss it, and I can throw out some ideas that I have on that. But I think maybe we should try to address them separately. And I think we might have. Did we lose Mike?
No, I'm here.
Oh, I just don't. Oh, there you are. Okay.
I have my invisible cloak. I put on my invisible cloak. Yes, Dr. Corrado.
So I guess, I agree with Mandy. I feel like those two documents, while they do overlap slightly, I think they have very different final information that's in them. So I think I would prefer to keep them separate. I think I would prefer to have a group of 3 people work on them. I feel like each individual going through it all and writing up what they think is a lot of work. Whereas if we have a committee, I feel like, we could do that. I mean, I'd be happy to volunteer to head up the committee for the human factors. The committee could work on it and then perhaps send that out. And if the individual members then want to read that, comment on it, add something to it, that's great. But I feel like it'd be a lot of work for each of us to go through each document. I don't know that it's necessary. That's my thought.
And Kathy, almost even in the human factors, if that subcommittee might even want to break down because there's so many different areas, it's just so broad that it covers that. I'd be happy to work on that human factors subcommittee as well. And I'd spent a considerable amount of time on it over the summer, and had to go back and pull that document back up. But I think, that something like that might be helpful.
Any other thoughts on the proposition here that we form 2 subcommittees to look at each report separately, and then provide that summary to the rest of the subcommittee that we can respond in writing with our additional thoughts and points that we would like to make. Any other comments or questions?
Just throw it out there that we're a small group, and I probably am not going to be allowed to help with either of them. So I just want to put that out there that it's going to be a lot of work. And I don't know what the expectation is and how quickly this should be turned around, but I will ask. But it's doubtful that I would be able to help.
Understood.
Mike, I think on the second report that was issued, if we want to skip to that, if we all agree that maybe the human factors, we should have a subcommittee, if people agree or have some other ideas on that. And I guess what can we put some ideas together? I'm almost thinking, Kathy, that it's almost going through each of the different recommendations and scoring them somehow. you know, at the end to say, hey, this might be aspirational. This has already been covered somewhere else. You know, doesn't apply to, I don't remember all of them in detail, but that this should be considered, you know, some type of scoring on each one of the separate recommendations.
That's similar to what I was thinking for the human factors. I mean, I sort of, I think I already had done that myself when I had read it. I was taking notes. So I think, I think that I like that idea too. I think the problem with, or not the problem, I guess my question is, you know, again, we could write that, say we do that and we, you know, we say, okay, these are recommendations that you should consider. I still think it's going to be up to the BioTwig to determine, you know, if they want to address those or incorporate something. But I think we're at least giving the BioTwig our thoughts, and obviously then the commission would have a document that listed our thoughts that, you know, if they had questions, they could ask the BioTwig as well.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. I much prefer a bottom-up approach where, you know, the people in the lab have a say in this rather than just top-down, you know, adopt this XYZ. And I agree, there's a lot of really good things in that human factors report. There's a lot of good things in the final foundation review. There was, it was very similar to the draft. There were some things that were done, you know, cleaning up some parts that were a huge improvement, in my opinion.
I guess one question I
Before
have
you move
about
forward,
that doc, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yep, just before you move too much farther forward, I think this would require a motion. So if you're going to form a subgroup, as you're talking this out, if you want to make that consolidated into a motion, that would be appropriate.
Okay, yeah, let's at this time, I think we do have, at least from the discussion, a consensus that there is a consensus that we develop a subgroup of 3 that would examine, let's just focus on the human factors report for the moment. A subgroup of 3 that would go through and, you know, make sort of grading on which items are aspirational, which ones are, you know, doable, that kind of thing. So do I have a motion to form a subcommittee of 3 individuals that could work on this human factors report?
I make that motion.
Dr. Corrado has made the motion. Do I have a second? Dr. Sozier has given a second to the motion. So all in favor say aye. I'll start myself. Aye. Dr. Bieber?
Fred Bieber, aye.
Dr. Corrado?
Aye.
Dr. Gettings?
Aye.
And Dr. Sozier?
Sozier, aye.
Okay, the motion passes. So we will develop a subcommittee of 3. Oh gosh, I probably should have wrapped in the 3 members of the subcommittee. Is that, Shelley, do I need to have another motion to impanel the 3 individuals?
Dr. Cole, I believe that's in your purview to assign the members.
Okay. Okay.
And Mike, I would ask if, yeah, maybe if we wait to assign it for the other members that aren't here, because they might want to be involved in the subcommittee as well.
It's also appropriate.
Yes, that's a great idea. I was just going to put Dr. Kidd and Dr. Smith because they're here today. Okay, so we'll provide an update on the members of the panel once we've all had a chance to review and make any additional comments. So I think that takes care, at least for the moment, of our item item D, which is the human factors report. The next item was E, the mixture interpretation. So that final report of the NIST Scientific Foundation Review, which was released in December. And again, the commission had requested that the subcommittee, you know, be provided with validations and SOPs from the New York State laboratories that are using probabilistic genotyping. So Again, I feel it's appropriate that we also form another committee of 3 to, again, examine, make recommendations, look at all of this material from the protocols and validation studies that have been provided to us, and panel a group of 3 to once again make a summary report that would be sort of guidance for the bio twig. So do I have or I guess, is there any comment, any further discussion before we move forward?
So what is your view of what they're actually asking for? Review the validations and align with the mixture report and see if there are gaps in the validations? Is that the idea?
To me, that makes the most sense because there was such a disconnect between what was asked back in 2021 and what is now a reality in 2024. I think at the time when the draft report came out, there was a feeling that the final report would be out very soon. So I think that was with that, I rewatched the commission meeting, and they were like, well, let's just wait until the final report comes out. I don't know. There may be a further request coming. I don't know, but at least from what I can tell, yes, I agree with you, Dr. Gettings. It's probably just an examination of what these validation studies and protocols look like versus what topics in the foundation review final report, and is there an alignment or the things that need to be addressed. I think that's the mission.
I think just for more perspective too, this final document came out after the commission meeting in December, so the commission hasn't had any time to think or talk about it. And our office was tasked with sort of retaining this request from 2021, and we did wait so long, but we had those documents. I think if you all wanted the most updated current versions of things, we could ask the labs for that if it makes sense in whatever the ask from the commission will become. But they're meeting in 2 weeks, and I would anticipate they'd have some conversation regarding this document. They didn't have it in December because it didn't exist for them to look at.
Okay.
I think, Mike, I think a little bit, the thing that's maybe different between this document is this document has, key takeaways, which are not necessarily recommendations. And I feel like reviewing the laboratory's validations against this document might not. I think there's also the OSAC document for validation of probabilistic genotyping, which the labs probably were using when they did their validations as well. So I guess I agree we should maybe look at the validations, but I'm not sure if we should really be looking at them against this document or not. Maybe the first step would be to have a subgroup look at this document, look at the key takeaways, and see is there anything in those that we think we should address with the labs, or the labs should address. And then from there, maybe decide, because I'm not sure comparing their validations against this document is really, I'm not sure if that's the right thing that we want to do or not.
Right.
I mean, like, for instance, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, if a takeaway is, labs should be doing proficiency tests that incorporate probabilistic genotyping if they're using that in casework. I mean, that's not related to their validation, but that's probably a good recommendation that we perhaps would want to comment on. So there might be other things other than validation in here. But I think none of us have had a chance, I assume, to read it in depth since it's been published again.
That's a great point. So would it be prudent to hold off on any kind of forming a panel, and maybe just we at this moment take some time to review the final report and then wait for any requests that may or may not be coming from commission at their next meeting?
I think.
Yeah.
Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
I was just going to say that Shelley had suggested reaching back out to the labs too to get any updates. So if this does look like something that's coming, then maybe we could kind of preemptively try to request those documents. So we're not waiting for that next meeting as well.
Excellent.
And I think, go ahead.
No, Kathy, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I don't know that I think it's a good idea for us to wait for the commission to tell us what they'd like. I wonder if maybe we could make a motion to just form a subcommittee to review the NIST document and determine from any of the key takeaways if there's items that we think we could ask the BioTwig to address or we could address. Because I feel like I'm not sure what happens at the commission meeting is that, you know, a lot of people on those committees are not experts in the field. And so, you know, they might, I mean, it's fine if they want to ask us to do something more, but maybe it's a good idea for us to suggest what we think we should do so that we're giving them some guidance as to how we think we can help.
That's a great point.
So I was going to say, when I went back and looked at the meeting where this was initially brought up, the takeaway that I got from that was they were asking the DNA subcommittee, are the mixture interpretations that are coming out, there are the results coming out of the state of New York, accurate and reliable? And I think that's what I felt they were asking. You know, here's a report where there's some issues that are brought up, and is New York, are the results coming out of New York accurate? And, you know, I started to think about what could we do about that? And I started to think, if I was a person if I was a victim and I was a victim of a crime and I wanted to make sure that the lab results were accurate, would I hire Mandy Sozer to review those results from probabilistic genotyping? And I said, no, I wouldn't. Or if I was a defendant, would I hire Mandy to do that? No, I think I'd hire her to do other things, but I wouldn't hire her to do that. So I felt like I was not capable of it. Is so, I think it is quite complex that I felt like I'm not capable of looking at those validation results in that level of detail and making an assessment on that. Now, if there are other people on the committee that feel they are, then that's a different story. But and I thought, how could we do this without putting a big burden on the laboratory? And I thought we should potentially, and I'm just throwing this out as a wild idea, but potentially entertain hiring somebody. I don't know if, you know, New York State can do that, hiring people that are independent of the process to look at those validation data, to look at the if people participated in mixture interpretation, and I'm not saying, you know, a sexual assault case, talking about more complex mixtures, to then say, yes, hey, the results that are coming out of the state of New York, we feel are accurate and reliable, and kind of put this to, you know, put this to rest, or maybe there's more validation or more studies that need to be done. I mean, it seems like from a first pass that the validation studies are quite comprehensive, but I'm just throwing that out as an idea.
Dr. Bieber.
Yes, following up on Amanda's comments, I've looked at these validations and they're quite different, and it's hard to evaluate them without worked examples. And given the NIST 13 study that happened a number of years ago, I'd be wondering how the different labs across the state would evaluate the same 3-person mixture. And so I would be interested, following up on Mandy's comment, how different analysts within a lab would interpret and analyze the same case, and how the different labs across the state of New York would analyze the same case. So I think the those questions would need to be addressed as part of our review of the individual protocols. I'd need to see worked examples. I look at mixture studies all the time in the consulting that I do for defense and for the government in prosecution. So the validations need to be done. Some of them are only doing 3-person mixtures, they're not doing 4. I think the standard now is probably a 4-person mixture, and some labs are even pushing that to 5-person mixtures. So there's not continuity from the protocols, the ones that were just submitted to us a few weeks ago. So they're quite different. None of them have worked examples, that's understandable, but I think to evaluate them carefully, we need to see worked examples.
I do think if you'd like updated documents, that could be helpful. Some of these documents you received would have been done in 2021. Some maybe in 2022. And I think we've heard from the last lab in New York that they're working on their validation now. So there's one lab who's yet to come online. And they're hoping to do it this spring. So that could lend to some of the variance that you're seeing. I don't know if when the validation guidelines came out, if some of these validations were done prior to that or not.
Dr. Corrado.
Yeah, I guess I'm feeling like the labs have done these validations a while ago and they continue to do them. And remember, these validations are all reviewed during their QAS audits by technical experts. So I'm not sure that looking at the validations one by one at this point makes a lot of sense. I think to Dr. Beaver's point, the validations, each one is not going to show you a worked example, as you pointed out. I mean, they did do worked examples to create the summary, but maybe the better, if we're looking to see and answer the question that Mandy felt like the commission brought up, maybe the better thing would be to focus on the probabilistic genotyping proficiency test. I mean, those are currently, my understanding is they're currently available from a vendor. And that would sort of hit Mandy's point and Dr. Beaver's point or Fred's point that, those are worked examples. So maybe the question is, if laboratories in the state are doing probabilistic genotyping, they should participate in those proficiency tests. And then you are comparing worked examples, and we are comparing the same worked example, and we see what the results are. I just think that, the validations, at least the ones I reviewed in the past and some of the ones I looked at, I mean, they're very comprehensive and they are following the guidelines and they are reviewed during the QAS. So I think the proficiency test is perhaps a better measure of, are the labs getting the expected answers?
Well, one of the things I noticed in at least one of the validations we were sent is their guesstimates of the number of contributors, I think, ignored the fact that there are now a number of software products out there to do that. And they're using, I think, the allele counting method, which has its challenges. So I think I'd like to see some standardization across the state in terms of that basic element, which is a key starting point for mixture interpretation. How many people are in that mixture? And the practices vary quite a bit in these validations. And at least one of them either isn't aware of or has chosen not to use any of the software tools, one of which was developed by someone at Syracuse University, as you know.
I agree. I think, well, to go back just for a second with Dr. Corrado, I think that the proficiency testing is a good idea, because if you do an interlab study and you decide to use one particular commercial kit vendor, not all labs may be using that kit. So you're putting other labs at a disadvantage who are not familiar with the ins and outs of how a competitor kit works. And so I just from my own experience with doing interlab studies, if you're going to do something like this, you need to not only do it for one kit, you need to do it for other kits as well. So, but I do like if a lab is using their kit and their proficiency test, it can give insight as to how well they're hitting the target. Dr. Bieber, I think the point that you bring up with number of contributors, absolutely, that's going to be it's always kind of a question, and it may be one that the proficiency test may not be able to address. It depends on how complicated or how complex that proficiency test may be.
And of course, Dr. Coble, the elephant in the room is activity level. And this is a huge challenge for labs across the nation. How do they create meaningful and realistic validation studies that mimic in some reasonable way the instant case in front of them? And this, of course, is a well-known and not always valid defense challenge, but it's coming up all the time. Your lab, Dr. Smith, Dr. Jones, Dr. Smith, Dr. Baker, hasn't validated a 5-person mixture involving a doorknob, a steering wheel, and an item of denim clothing, have you? And so this is something we need to try to help the labs with, how to face the activity level issues that are becoming paramount. It's no longer is the question whose DNA is it, or whose DNA can't be excluded as part of that mixture, but how did it get there and when, since DNA isn't time-stamped. These are issues that labs are facing, and I think we need to try to help them.
I think that's a very valid point, Dr. Bieber. Coming from Texas, we have seen our share of these questions in court. But I think we should also maybe take this under advisement with the bio twig, I guess, if you will, for the state, and ask, simply ask, what kind of guidance. We're starting to work on guidance for what a analyst can say on the stand when they get asked these kind of questions. It's a very challenging, scientifically, it's very challenging to do these kinds of analyses at the activity level. It takes a lot of training. I would recommend a 18-month course just to even get yourself familiar with the intricacies of assigning likelihoods, assigning probabilities in an activity scenario. So I think that's maybe way in the future, but there may be things that could be discussed on how to handle that now, because Star Mix, which is predominantly being used in New York State, does not provide any information on the activity. It's just simply a sub or sub-source likelihood ratio. So I'm sorry, Dr. Giddings.
Sorry, just one comment on the proficiency test. I think a criticism would be that those are not particularly challenging mixtures. It's very difficult to design a test and evaluate the results of a test from a challenging mixture. So it would be, one sample that's probably a 3-person at most mixture with fairly high ratios. So I don't know that that's going to answer the question of if results are accurate and reliable across the state to the extent of the validations. But it is something that we can do,
And Mike, I think I'd be interested in hearing from the labs how we could be the most helpful to them as well, because I think they want, everyone wants the same thing.
I think that's very fair. Okay, I don't know how to wrap this up and put a bow on it. I think we've talked about quite a few things. I think all of them are quite valid and food for thought and potential discussions for the future. But for the moment, sitting where we are, I at least feel that it would be very helpful if we could get an update for the validations that, again, the document that we have is a compilation that started many years ago, perhaps providing us with an update. And then, we talked about reviewing the final NIST Foundation Review Report to look at some of those key takeaways to see if there are, again, maybe looking to see if they're relevant or aspirational, that kind of thing, and at least start looking in that respect. So I guess the question is, do we want to form another subcommittee of 3 that would take on that task of looking at the NIST mixture review, the final foundational review, and sort of preparing ourselves with anything that may potentially come from the commission after their next meeting? Are there any comments on that? There are 2 parts there. The first, getting an update on the validations and any changes that may have been made or new ones coming. There's one more, but that may be a little while. And then the second part would be to a committee of 3 to look through those key takeaways in the NIST report. Do I have
if you are going to pursue either course, I would recommend a motion for either.
Yes. So.
And Mike, can I just add to that? I spoke with John Butler yesterday about the report and asked him if he would be available to the subcommittee to discuss that, and and he said yes to that yesterday. So if you convene a subcommittee, I'm sure that he would be happy to support that subcommittee on the key takeaways as well.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Soder. That would be a great idea. Any other discussion, comments before we ask for a vote on a motion?
I think the motion that I would make towards the NIST document, mixture document, would be to form a subcommittee of 3 to just review the document and see if there's any information in there that we feel like we could comment on in terms of providing suggestions to the lab, or yeah, I think that I'd leave it at that.
Yeah.
I mean, because I don't know that there's many things in that. I think the document's very good. I don't know if there's many things in there that are actually things that labs have to do, but I think it'd be worthwhile for us to review it and kind of point out or highlight things that we think the labs might want to consider.
Excellent point. So at this point, do we have a motion to first receive an update on the validation and materials from the labs, and secondly, in addition to that, in paneling a 3-person panel to, as Dr. Corrado said, look at the key takeaways with an eye toward developing some summaries of where things that could help or assist the analysts in the lab, the BioTwig, helping with the people on the ground that are dealing with these issues.
So moved.
Dr. Bieber has made a motion to approve the formation of that subcommittee and an update. Do I have a second?
Second.
Dr. Gettings has seconded the motion. So when I call on you, please let me know your vote. I vote aye. Dr. Bieber.
Fred Bieber, aye.
Dr. Corrado.
Aye.
Dr. Gettings.
Aye.
And Dr. Sozer.
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries. Thank you all very much. We will again provide more details on the people that will be on the committee, subcommittee, and we will provide that in a future update. Our last item on the agenda as far as business to conduct is new business. And so under new business, we have the 2024 annual laboratory summary. So Ms. Palmer, could you provide us with information regarding the 2024 annual laboratory summaries?
As you may recall, this document is a document that Office of Forensic Services uses throughout the year to track the documents that are required for New York State laboratory accreditation. It's a summary that shows the information that you've received. Once we get to the end of the year and compile it, we send it to the labs for their verification to ensure that everything they intended to send us, they did, and everything we received, we should have. And then the labs certify that. So this represents the 8 DNA labs in New York State and their annual summaries.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Palmer? Okay, thank you very much for the update. The next item on our agenda are laboratory disclosures. We will first start with the Suffolk County Crime Laboratory with a DNA extraction issue. The quality action form was received January 13th. We do have members of the laboratory available for any questions. This is a closeout of a corrective action relating to the incorrect amount of template DNA used for amplification, leading to an uninterpretable DNA profile, which was first discussed in our August 2024 meeting. Following an investigation, the laboratory worksheet was modified to implement an additional check documented by a second qualified individual to verify how much target DNA will be amplified for each sample. The worksheet will also show when edits are made to entries and by whom. Analysts have been made aware of quiet spaces in the laboratory to allow for work to be completed without interruption, and management is also working to add positions to the section to assist with additional responsibilities besides casework to help alleviate stress. ANAB has acknowledged receipt of the closeout. Do we have any questions for the laboratory? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move to the next disclosure. This is from the Monroe County Crime Laboratory, late notification of unexpected proficiency tests. We do have members of the laboratory available to speak. This is a notification that the laboratory missed the 30-day notification period for unexpected results on 3 proficiency tests. The lab has determined, to ensure reporting within the designated time frame, that a disclosure will be made for all 2025 proficiency tests where unexpected results are anticipated to occur due to laboratory policy and proficiency test planning. ANAB has acknowledged the disclosure. Does anyone have any questions for the laboratory?
I just want to, I think, confirm or clarify that when we say unexpected, this is that issue of certain testing not being performed because of the cycles of the tests and who is qualified to do what. Is that everyone else's understanding? I don't know that we need to ask the labs, but.
Yes, and I think because of the time frame on this notification is the other significant piece of that.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
The word unexpected always, sounds
I know.
sounds that way, but we've encountered this before.
We've talked about that before, yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move to the next item, which is the New York City OCME Department of Forensic Biology a case-to-case contamination event. This is an update. Oh, I'm sorry, we do have members of the laboratory available for any questions. This is an update to the investigation into case-to-case contamination. We've heard about this in the past. To date, the laboratory has reviewed over 20,000 samples, and based on the recommendations of the Root Cause Analysis Committee, they'll be focusing on the next phase of reviews on a more narrow subset of cases processed prior to March 2024. The findings of this review will determine the next steps of the investigation. Does anyone have any questions for the laboratory on this particular item? Okay, hearing none, we'll now move to our next to the last item on our agenda, which is executive session. The next item is, I'm sorry, Dr. Corrado, please.
I'm sorry, I just want to ask one thing related to the previous motion. Is it okay for me to ask that now, since we're finishing out the business?
Sure.
Okay. Part of that motion was that we would receive the new validation data from the laboratories, correct?
Yes, an updated
Updated.
validation.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that was what part of the motion. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yes, yeah, there were two parts to that, getting an update and then forming that panel, subcommittee, I guess.
Thank you.
So the next item on our agenda is executive session. Do I have a motion to go into executive session to discuss matters relating to a current investigation or matters that may lead to the appointment, promotion, demotion, discipline, or suspension of a particular person? Do I have a motion? Dr. Sozier has made a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Dr. Corrado has seconded the motion. So when I call on you, please state your vote. My vote is aye. Dr. Bieber?
Dr. Bieber, aye.
Dr. Gettings?
Aye.
Dr. Corrado?
Aye.
And Dr. Sozier?
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries. At this point, if you're not a subcommittee member or staff, we will ask for you to leave the virtual meeting, and streaming will pause. We will resume streaming once the executive session has ended. Thank you. Hey, good morning. Welcome back. We finished our executive session and no action was taken during the executive session. So we are, the next item in our agenda is to end the meeting. Our next meeting of the subcommittee will be May the 2nd, 2025. The location will be determined. We'll be sure to advertise in advance to let everyone know. At this point, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I make a motion.
A motion from Dr. Sozier. Do I have a second? Dr. Gettings, thank you. Dr. Gettings has seconded the motion. So when I call on you, please state your vote. My vote is aye. Dr. Bieber?
Fred Bieber, aye.
Dr. Corrado?
Aye.
Dr. Gettings?
Aye.
And Dr. Sozier?
Aye.
The motion carries, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.